Hello, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to day 3 of this virtual symposium. As you are all aware, this is providing an important platform for the Syrian academic community to share and showcase their valuable research, and has highlighted the importance of local knowledge, insights, expertise, and the many connections that exist and we know will continue to exist. On that last point, I know those of us based in the UK benefit and have benefited greatly from our connections with the Syrian academic community over a very long time. Perhaps it's the unique landscape, geology, fauna and flora that have attracted UK-based scientists to Syria when that's been possible. But as much as that, it's the number of Syrian scientists who have contributed to UK science, either through being based here or as much of the result of them sharing their understanding and data. So I just wanted to start by saying thank you very much indeed. With that in mind, it's especially appropriate for the Royal Society to partner with the Council for At-Risk Academics on this event. I hardly need to say that Cara does vital work in ensuring at-risk academics from Syria and other parts of the world can seek refuge from violence, conflict and persecution and reach a place where they can continue their work in safety, as well as to facilitate their continuing contributions as academics in exile. Now, currently, I'm the Foreign Secretary at the Royal Society, but this is only week 2, so I'm really still on that steep part of the learning curve that we academics are all too familiar with. But I'm also a member of the International Science Council's Committee for Freedom and Responsibility in Science, which promotes freedom for scientists to pursue knowledge and to freely exchange ideas. Thus, I'm very pleased to have been invited to open day 3 of this symposium. Today's programme will explore how operationalising research can help to rebuild Syria's infrastructure. Today's discussions look especially interesting, and though I'm teaching undergraduates, I'm going to be popping back between the lectures. I suspect my students might be rather keen for me to just cancel the lectures, which reminds us, and let's face it, students are the same all over the world. But seriously, these are challenging times for academic freedom. In many places around the world, we're seeing the impact of growing political trends of nationalism, popularism, and authoritarianism, putting increased pressure on already at-risk academics and undermining their protections. We also see the impact of conflicts on academics' ability to work freely, and we see the situation further exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. It's therefore more important than ever to stand up for the rights and freedoms of academics and scientists globally as we seek to embark upon a sustainable, resilient and inclusive recovery. The Society believes that academics and scientific freedom are essential components of excellent science, which then benefits all of humanity. Last year, the Society published a statement on the need to support academic freedom, which makes clear that we consider academic freedom to be central to the practice of science. It attempts to define what academic freedom is, both for individuals and institutions, and it highlights what threats to that freedom might look like. So please do go to our website at royalsociety.org and read and share our statement. Now, the Society currently holds the chair of the UK Academy's Human Rights Committee, which brings together the academies of the UK to advocate for the academic freedom and individual rights of researchers to conduct their work around the world and to raise awareness for these issues more broadly. The Society is also pleased to partner with Cara on the 8th Science and Civilization Lecture. This is a series which brings together a range of leading academics, writers, philosophers, and other renowned public figures to discuss important questions relating to academic freedom. The lecture, the 2021 lectures, just happened, in fact, was delivered by Professor Inga Tieffer, who has been at the forefront of issues relating to academic freedom in recent years. Having served as president and rector of the Central European University between 2016 and 2021, he saw the expulsion of Central European University from Budapest and its re-establishment in Vienna. He's written and spoken widely on democracy, human rights, governance, and the history of Central and Eastern Europe. You can watch that recorded talk, and again, if you go to the Royal Society's website, but also to the Royal Society's YouTube channel. Now, I also wanted to mention the work of the International Science Council's Committee for Freedom and Responsibility of Science, of which I'm a member. And in particular, there is a report that's just about to be published on freedom and responsibility in a contemporary context. We thought a lot about that issue of what does freedom and responsibility look like at the moment. But of course, this is changing. It changes every year, certainly every decade. So the contemporary context here is very important. Now, in that, we discussed the freedoms, but also balanced that with the responsibilities to carry out science in a robust, open, and reproducible manner. And it's going to be available at the end of this month. And I also wanted to mention the value that we in CFRS put on the support and leadership of Cara. So finally, let me finish by emphasising the considerable interest and importance placed by the UK academic community on what is being done to help researchers affected by conflicts. In that context, the Society is delighted to support this week's event, conscious of the terrible impact that the conflict in Syria has had on Syrian academics. Looking ahead, we hope and expect to be working further with Cara and supporting their vital efforts to ensure that at-risk academics can reach a place where they can continue their research in safety. So thank you very much for listening. And it's now my pleasure to hand over to Dr. Flavia Schlegel, who's the Special Envoy for Science in Global Policy, who will be delivering a keynote talk on science at risk, risking more than science. Dr. Schlegel has held positions including as a science diplomat in the USA and China, as UNESCO's Assistant Director for Natural Sciences, and as Vice Director at the Swiss Federal Office for Public Health. So over to you.
Thank you, Robin. And with over 80 million, the world is currently witnessing the highest numbers of forcibly displaced people on record. We don't really know the exact numbers of how many scientists are forcibly displaced, but every one of them is one too many. But what we do know is that during the last 2 years, the pandemic has immensely added to the burden of displaced people and to those who support them. In all these difficult circumstances, this symposium showcasing the work of Syrian scientists seems like a beacon of hope and a step forward. And it is really a great honor and pleasure for me to be part of it. I'd like to thank you, Robin, Professor Grimes, for your kind introduction, and to the Cara team, to the British Academy and the Royal Society for bringing me on board and for bringing all of us together today. And also many thanks to the technical team and to the translation. You are instrumental for our mutual understanding. And to you all, dear participants, I wish you good morning, good afternoon, or evening, hoping that you all are in a safe place and well. The title of my talk for this opening segment of today's symposium is Science at Risk, Risking More Than Science. And let me just quickly clarify that my definition of science includes all scientific disciplines, the natural, the technical, the social, engineering, and the humanities. We need all of that knowledge. Why did I choose this title? Well, during my professional career over the last 20 years in international science cooperation, as a science diplomat or a science broker, I was confronted with different situations of risk. In the US, for example, after 9/11, when the country closed its borders to scientists with the wrong names or the wrong nationalities. In China, where social scientists, out of fear of repercussions, had to carefully navigate issues such as democracy. Or at UNESCO, where we monitored the situation of scientists worldwide. Or at the International Science Council, which Robin has already mentioned, supporting the freedom of scientists to express their views and the evolving knowledge regarding the pandemic. Personally, I'm deeply convinced that the respect for and the support to academic freedom and critical thinking are very strong indicators for the well-being and the resilience of a society and the take of that society on equity and justice. And I do consider science as a global public good. You're also relating in today's symposium on SDGs, and the framework of the UN 2030 agenda and the SDGs have been guiding my work over the last few years. The world community highlighted science, technology, and innovation as key success factors for sustainable development, integrating for the first time social, economic, and ecological issues in one agenda. But if science is instrumental, so is the recognition and the protection of freedom of science and scientific researchers, as documented as well in UNESCO's recommendations of 2017. But it seems very difficult to implement and monitor the status of these recommendations. Why? Geopolitics pose great threats to academic freedom of people and institutions. And as Robin has already mentioned, Cara, since its origins in the 1930s, and other organizations such as the Scholar Rescue Fund or the Scholar at Risk Programme, have faced many waves of threats to the specific countries and regions, be it from 2011 on now in Syria to the latest conflicts in Myanmar, in Belarus, or the current tragedy in Afghanistan. Regarding Scholars at Risk, just allow me to briefly highlight tomorrow's launch of the latest report, Free to Think 2021. And I think together with the publication by the International Science Council to be released shortly as well, I think we have a great update again on the status of scholars around the world, because it is very important to monitor the situation and to talk about it. And on top of geopolitics, a devastating pandemic traps people in places where they should not be, excludes them from places where they should be able to go. Travel and visa rules and regulations change suddenly and unexpectedly, and the pandemic leaves science as a whole at a very critical juncture, because what the scientists say is not always comfortable or easy facts for politicians. So science at risk does not only risk the science community and knowledge production. Ultimately, it risks the development of resilient and equitable society. And it is, for many of you, a very direct threat also to your families or to your colleagues' lives. But let me not become too gloomy. During these days, you cover some of these topics with much more expertise than I ever could. And as I mentioned right in the beginning, this symposium is first and foremost a celebration and a showcase of the achievement of Syrian scientists. Showcasing, presenting, and sharing are key objectives of this week's symposium, and certainly also key steps in response to today's topic, operationalizing research to help rebuild Syria's infrastructure. There are different aspects on how to operationalize research. But to me, it seems that all aspects are closely linked to the nature of the academic system itself, to politics, and to money. Let me briefly mention only two aspects. First, sharing and debating. The possibility to share and debate one's findings is absolutely essential, because it creates access to fellow scientists, to literature, to professional development, but also to exposure and to publications. And as important as sharing and debating are, is also the recognition that creating impact is always context specific. Or in other words, research needs to include and practice representing the local context. Therefore, in my opinion, including Syrian scientists in science and challenges related to Syria is not a nice to have. It is not an act of charity, but it is a sign of excellence and a success factor towards impact. It is a shared responsibility of members of academia. But this academic system has already been quite challenged by the SDGs. There is a call for more sustainability sciences, for more inter- and transdisciplinary approaches, inclusion of gender aspects, and the very old call to have more women scientists participate. Issues such as open science or fair principle for data, right now the hottest global commodity of our time, question the current system in many ways. To respond to these challenges, academic success has to develop other criteria than just citation index or publication rate. Norms and standards of the current science practice have always been dominated by approaches of the Western or Northern Hemisphere. There's no doubt that displaced scientists have to adapt to the host country or region. Don't take me wrong, as I mentioned earlier, context matters. But academic standards should respect and reflect the specific situations, needs, and limiting factors of displaced scientists regarding language, career, or skills development. Academic standards should level the playing field for scientists from different cultural and social backgrounds, and in particular for scientists at risk. The number of scientists at risk is increasing, and scientific freedom is under attack from many fronts. As Robin has already mentioned, there is no easy way out. To act and to support are not only a moral obligation, but it will improve the performance of the global science system, and it will safeguard skills already developed, and it provides young and early career scientists with a positive perspective and outlook. And in this regard, I would like to acknowledge the Global Young Academy and their new program offering mentorship to displaced young scientists. But academia always takes place in a social and political circumstances. And I mentioned the role of politics and money when it comes to operationalizing research. Let's look at politics. Rebuilding efforts around the globe show that without the support of communities credibly representing a country or a region, and without some kind of functioning governance structure, it will be very difficult to achieve sustainable results. It does require an internationally agreed plan informed by science, which respects national sovereignty, which includes checks and balances, safeguards or progress made, and commitment to sufficient funding. Science alone will not succeed. It will require a great deal of political will, regionally and internationally. And the symposium now offers the chance to policymakers to learn from Syrian scientists what they think about these issues, specifically in relation to SDGs 7 and 9. So today's sessions does mark a real step forward. As the symposium showcases results and reflections to policymakers, to fellow scientists, it also showcases to funders. And this leads me to money, or if I say it a little bit more diplomatically, to the issue of funding. Competition for funding had been strong already before the pandemic, for health, for climate, for biodiversity, food security, digital transformation, and so on. And obviously, it's become even greater now. The funding landscape is complex and not easy to decipher. Impossible for displaced scientists who are not familiar with the host country system and who have to struggle for basic needs, which sets them at disadvantage in comparison to their competitors. This is a call to funding agencies to fund services provided by Cara and similar institutions for displaced scientists, and to provide sufficient and long-term funding. The same could be asked from academic institutions in countries which can be considered safe havens. Why not dedicate 1% of annual budgets? Rebuilding science for Syria and rebuilding Syria requires many ingredients. Science and Syrian scientists are essential for both. And let me here briefly greet all the female scientists present. They face additional barriers just by the fact that they are women. And it's been a long-standing issue how we could globally increase the participation of women in the scientific enterprise. Cara, the Royal Society, the British Academy, and others make a huge contribution in enabling and facilitating this exchange over this week's time. Their contribution cannot be overestimated. Many thanks again, and thanks as well to all volunteers and hosting institutions. And coming to the end of my input, I think if wishing were still possible, I would wish that maybe in 10 years' time, after a strong peace settlement had been reached for Syria, we would meet again and you all could report on how your science shaped the rebuilding of Syria and how you did save more than science for Syria. I wish you a fruitful day and thanks for listening.
Am I going into the... Hello, good day. I'm Michael Worton. I'm chair of Cara, and I'd like to talk just for a little while about how we work and how the way that we work influences the way that we think we can help to develop our Syrian colleagues and all of the many at-risk colleagues throughout the world. Since 1933, we've had two absolutely core aims. The first one is a mission of rescue to help academics who have been or who are at the moment at risk of being persecuted, attacked or discriminated against by bringing them to sanctuary in the UK and increasingly to universities in Europe and beyond. And secondly, through a mission of rebuilding. We want, since 1933, to advance higher education by supporting academics in countries where their work is at risk or compromised, so those who are still in their country and not in exile. For instance, we have the Syria Programme, our very big programme of the moment. In the past, we've had an Iraq programme and a Zimbabwe programme, both of which I would venture to say have made a significant difference to the way those countries and the academics in them have been moving on since the programmes. We are, it must be said, a relatively small charity, yet I'm proud to say that we managed to help a lot of academics and their families. On our fellowship programme, which brings people to the UK to sanctuary and to work in universities, we're currently supporting 370 fellows and some 530 family members who come with them. On the Syria programme, we currently have more than 200 Syrians who are actively engaging with the Syria programme and a couple of hundred more who are registered with us and keep an eye on the things that we are doing. So we help a lot of people, but we are small. Now, I think one of the reasons that we're able to work successfully is because we have nearly 90 years of experience doing this and doing this in very different countries. We've got experience of working in very complex and very dangerous environments. So people know that we have a record of delivering on our rescue, on our professional development, and on our capacity building agendas. Crucially, I think whatever our individual political and moral positions may be for those of us who work in Cara, our position as an organisation is that we remain resolutely neutral. We are not an advocacy organisation. We are a rescue and rebuilding organisation. And this is one reason, I think, why we are so successful and why we can work so well is because we are trusted by many, many different kinds of parties. Now, it's the combination of our status as a charity and as a small institution that we've always had to work in partnership, depending on the work, the ideas, the input of others. And the notion of partnership working is important to us as an organisation, but it also informs the way that we think about how we engage with the individual academics with whom we work. Our most important partner is, by a fair way, the UK higher education sector. We work with 90 universities in the UK, which represents about 65% of all UK universities. And of course, we aim ultimately, soon, I hope, to be working with 100% of the UK universities. Very importantly for us is working with the national academies, notably the Royal Society and the British Academy, but also with the Royal Society of Edinburgh, for instance, and the Royal Society of Engineering. And we work with a growing number of learned and professional societies. So therefore, we have got institutional partnerships. We've also got individual partnerships with individual academics who, outside of their roles in their own universities, volunteer their help with us in many, many different ways. We've got 400 different individual academics from universities right across the UK who volunteer in many different ways, be it English for academic purposes, development of academic skills, working as PIs, working as mentors or whatever. And in the fellowship programme, bringing people to the UK, we have more than 500 individuals supporting our fellows, again, in many different ways. We work with many organisations in the public, private, charitable and philanthropic sectors, ranging from benefactors of trusts and foundations, individual benefactors, with publishers, with educational technology organisations who can help to give discounts to our fellows, both in the UK and in our overseas work. Working with international NGOs. Flavia has already mentioned some of them, but I'd like to pay tribute especially to Pause in France, to the Scholars at Risk programme, and also the Scholars Rescue Fund in the US, and the Philip Schwartz initiative in Germany. We work very closely with each other. And interestingly, we are all slightly different. And I think it's the difference between the organisation. We share, if you like, a moral view, a mission view, but the very difference of the way in which we work, I think, is an enormous strength as we can work and complement each other. We work also with UN agencies, of course, and being based in the UK, we work closely with the Association of Commonwealth Universities and so on. So if you like, we're working with a lot of very different kinds of organizations. There is a wonderful saying, which you find in many, many different countries, that it takes a whole village to educate a child. It's not just one school with its teachers, it's the whole village that educates the child. And I think in some ways, we at Cara would say it takes many different communities to develop an academic. And that's why our vision of helping our fellows, be they in something like our Syria programme or in our UK fellowship programme, what we're aiming to do is to enable their professional development, but also their entire development as a citizen of the world, helping them to settle into different communities, to work with the local communities where they live, as well as the local university environments in which they work, and so on. And it's due in many ways to the age of Cara, to the fact that we've been around for a long time, and to the depth and the breadth of our many partnerships, that we've been able to establish significant convening function, whereby we can bring together organizations and individuals to debate issues and work together to find solutions to problems, not always, but at least begin to see how we can find solutions to problems, and make recommendations, just as Flavia has made earlier, make recommendations for positive ways in the way that higher education works internationally, and especially how higher education internationally responds to conflicts and to other major societal and intra-societal partnerships. So if you like, partnership working is part of the DNA of Cara as an organization. And we see it also as essential and potentially transformative on the individual academic level. In the Syria programme, for instance, we have a very strong focus on fostering research collaborations, and that's much of what we're talking about throughout the day this week. We've heard some marvelous interventions about research discoveries, about how people are working together and so on. But we recognise, we support and we celebrate those who choose to follow the path of the lone scholar. There are those who choose to do that, who choose to work alone, and we will always do all we can to support them in their own development, wherever they're taking it forward with our help. But we also explicitly and increasingly encourage our Syrian colleagues to work in teams and to understand what working in teams is, to reflect on what it means to work in teams, rather than seeing it as something which is purely instrumental. We also, and here I pick up on something that Flavia mentioned as well, we are also actively encouraging in the Syria programme interdisciplinarity. And I'll speak a little bit later about how we envisage interdisciplinarity in the programme. The working in teams means that the management of a research project can be more complex because there are more people involved, but complexity is often a good thing. It's not always a bad thing, because everybody brings different perspectives to the management of the project. The benefits are therefore enormous, as these different perspectives challenge and enrich all stages of the research processes. Earlier, I spoke about Cara's convening function. Now here I'd like to take that notion of convening in organization and take a different image. And this also resonates with a word that Flavia used in her presentation. In research, and more broadly in academic development, we at Cara feel that we have an important brokering function, bringing together individuals who often know very little, sometimes virtually nothing about each other, but who will, we think, well and productively together. Just as it were, as a marriage broker seeks to bring together two people who don't really know each other, and the broker hopes that they've got the chemistry right and that the couple will have a long and happy marriage. We therefore spend a lot of time fostering professional communications and connections between scientists and scholars in the UK and beyond by finding appropriate principal investigators, PhD supervisors, mentors, and so on for our researchers. And it is a process which we spend a great deal of time on, trying to find the right partner. They begin as strangers. We want them to become collaborators, and ultimately we hope they will also become friends. And it is gratifying to note that some of these one-to-one connections that we have brokered in the recent past, for instance, have already blossomed into long-term collaborations where trust and respect are shared on both sides. Now, as Robin was saying in his opening welcome, the academic world, the academic profession is a different thing today than it was perhaps even just 10, 20 years ago. We're constantly being expected to do more and more and more as our governments and other funders request us to go in different directions and bring different kinds of outputs and outcomes to our work. We're now expected to be much more professional in the ways that we undertake our teaching, our examining, and so on, all of our research activities. And we're also expected not only to publish in academic journals, in monographs, in a variety of different ways, but also to disseminate our findings to non-specialist general audiences. Now, there are many ways of disseminating work, and it's important to work out how best to achieve our own aims as researchers, and that's why we work with our fellows on dissemination activities increasingly, because you can disseminate by doing it yourself or with your academic partners and collaborators. You can do it by persuading others, such as people as different as artists, performers, communication professionals, or whatever, to disseminate your ideas. But it's bringing in different perspectives on what can be done with research funding that seems to us an important part of career development today. And allied to dissemination is something very close to my own heart, which is the mission of public engagement, which is now certainly in this country and increasingly in other countries regarded as an expectation of academics. And this involves public engagement, involves the many ways in which the activity of higher education and the benefits of higher education and research can be shared with the public, who are, after all, the major funders of the HE system through their taxes. We often think that it's the government who are making our decisions, but we must never forget it is the taxpayer who is funding a great deal of what we're doing. Therefore, we need to find new ways of communicating with the broader, what we call the general public. And what is essential about dissemination of research, in my view, is that it is always a two-way process. It moves beyond our traditional ways of publishing our research findings, which is a gift largely to the academic community, but beyond for those who are interested. Dissemination is taking that step further. Again, it is a sharing, a giving, but public engagement involves interaction, two-way interaction, deep listening, not simply surface listening, with a goal of achieving and generating mutual benefits, learning, developing, gaining new sites and so on, but it's all about mutuality. And at best, I would argue that public engagement involves participatory research. General public are involved in the research process itself, not as grateful recipients, but as co-creators of the research process, including the research process. This will mean, of course, that we will have to learn new communication, new participatory skills. We'll need also to change our mindsets and learn how to translate our specialist academic language into clearer discourse that everyone can understand. And this is where I think there is an important link with interdisciplinarity. Interdisciplinarity seeks to address global challenges such as the SDGs, which are underpinning all of the work this week, but also national issues of societal urgency, which cannot be solved by any single urgency. Sometimes in academia, we are not perhaps always as humble as we might be. I think it's important for us to recognize that there is no one individual academic, there is no one discipline that actually has all the answers to the problems that beset us. And the more that we learn and listen from and listen to each other, I think the better. And interdisciplinarity functions through the pooling of very different reservoirs of knowledge, but also different insights, different methodologies, different perspectives, different assumptions, and indeed different academic prejudices. This pooling, I think, therefore leads to a kind of cauldron whereby there operates a kind of modification of disciplinary approaches. Everybody learns, everybody makes compromises and modifications to their disciplines. We do need to learn the we need to learn the language of different disciplines sufficiently well to talk to other researchers and understand the relevance and the importance of their contributions to a project. And we need also to learn how to translate our own disciplinary language for others. I would also, though, argue that strong disciplines are essential for effective interdisciplinary research. I think what we're seeing across the world, notably in the United States at the moment, is that people are turning away from saying we must do everything only in interdisciplinary institutions, but actually realizing that we need to build very, very strong disciplines before we can then get them to work together in genuinely creative ways. So in many ways, the essence of interdisciplinarity lies in its recognition and in its exploitation of the creative power of difference. The success of higher education, I would argue, is dependent on international and, importantly, intercultural collaborations and partnerships. These partnerships are structured activities of and with difference. This is why we are keen to help academics to become active members of international networks and communities of scientists and scholars. And again, this is a two-way process. Every single Cara fellow, wherever she or he comes from, whatever their discipline, wherever they're working, enriches and in some way changes the people they're working with. Our universities in the UK are being slowly, gradually, but significantly changed over the years as more and more people come from Syria, from other conflict zones, from other countries and regions where there is persecution of academics because of what they believe, because of who they are, because of what they publish, and so on. And in many ways, therefore, they bring change which is not only academic, but which is cultural and social as well. Partnership working in all aspects of academic life leads to ever greater fulfillment and ever greater understanding. That's why we think it is so important. And I would like here to end in a conference which has a lot about science, the social sciences, the humanities, and so on, with just a reflection on something that the great German philosopher of the 20th century, Martin Heidegger, said in a very important work on what sameness and difference are about. He's a very difficult, but absolutely astonishingly brilliant and thoughtful and insightful philosopher. So I'll paraphrase what I think he's saying. He says, and it seems very simple, I can only say the same as you because I know that I am different from you. And I can only say to you that I'm different from you because I assume and know that there is some underlying sameness that binds us together. So sameness and difference are not binary opposites. They're not in any kind of opposition. They are in a kind of interactive, cognitive, social, and cultural dance. To live in and with difference is a great challenge. It's not easy. It really isn't easy. It's a great challenge, but it is also a great joy. And most importantly, it is essential. That is why, for us at Cara, with working with all of the at-risk academics with whom we try to support as best we can, partnership working as embodied and dynamic difference is vital for all of us as academics. Thank you. That's the end of this first session. There's going to be a break now. And then after the break, there's a session about infrastructure, which will be chaired by Professor Wendy Pullen. So do come back at 11 o'clock for that session. But before I end, I would like to say just how lovely it was and how uplifting it was to listen to Roger and to Flavia, who inspired me and gave me a lot to think about. So thank you both. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks. As inspiring was your talk. So thanks a lot to all of you and to all of you listening to us, and have a great day. Bye-bye.